Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Outside Insider podcast here on Philly Sports Network with myself, Liam Jenkins, where you know the score by now. All things Eagles related. The last 7 days wrapped up and stuffed inside Yannick Ngakoue's left shoe, just for you to listen to on this very quiet Friday evening. I say that very loosely because I know that every time I seem to upload one of these podcasts, the Eagles go and make a move, and that's been a trend for about a year now. It's happened with the videos as well. Talking of which, if you're on the YouTube channel, welcome. You'll see in the first 10 minutes of this podcast. The rest of it can be downloaded from the following platforms, if I remember them all. We've got Apple, we've got Spotify, Stitcher, I'm out already, Google Podcasts, all of them. Alright, wherever you get your podcasts, Deezer, yeah, and even Yannick Ngakoue's right shoe. It's on there as well. So if you want to listen to that podcast, that'd be fantastic. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, the best way to help it grow, obviously, Apple Podcasts. If you leave a rating of 5 stars, hit subscribe to it. It's free, doesn't cost you a penny. Best way to support the show. It's been a little bit of a hiatus for the Outside Insider podcast, mainly because, I'm not going to lie to you, it's hard doing a weekly podcast where it's just one of you and there's not much going on. I mean, it very rapidly deteriorates into LJ's love life stories, which are fine in some capacity, but then they wear thin after a while, so we have to stockpile them for the good days. And obviously now with free agency underway, there's a lot to talk about. The Eagles from Wednesday until today have ended up making a flurry of moves, 2 notable signings, a few re-signings, and obviously the rest of the players have been let go, so to speak, so that's always good. There's a lot to get through. I did just want to start out though with a big thank you more than anything, purely because the last week has been beyond stressful. I mean, I've still got another can of Red Bull here, okay? It's not sponsored podcast yet, I'm afraid, guys, but I've literally demolished a 12-pack of these in about 2 weeks. It's been a very, very rocky period from like just 13-hour days pretty much trying to give you the best free agency coverage we can. And it was been you guys that have really spurred me on to push that extra bit harder to get, you know, when I get home or it's like 5 in the morning to report on the Darius Slate trade, or if it's 1 a.m. here to get that extra video out on Javon Hargrave, because I want you guys to have the best content possible, and the support that you're showing me in return for that is unbelievable. So just thank you for taking time out of what is a very stressful period for all of you. I know over there in America, or wherever you're listening to this, the coronavirus is a heavy topic. Everyone's a little bit stressed out. To just add in a little bit of sunshine or a little bit of humour or just a bit of a distraction from the stress of the outside world is, you know, what I'm aiming to do with this. So I'm glad that I'm able to do that for you. And yeah, thank you for taking times out of those hectic schedules to just let me be a part of it. It's always a pleasure. But I wanted to start today's show with something that I don't think has been spoken about enough. And I think it's partly in 2 reasons. One of them is because that the Darius Slade trade happened a day later, which is never good. It kind of automatically moves the scope onto the new player. It's always the next big thing, isn't it? And I think the other reason is that it's not the sexy, flashy, heroic move. It's a very Howie move. It's a very Eagles move, isn't it, to bolster through the trenches. So I want to take a minute to talk about Javon Hargrave, because I think the Eagles may have got probably so far the steal of free agency here. And I don't just mean in terms of, they've got a very good nose tackle, it doesn't cost a lot. I mean in relative terms to the rest of the contracts being signed, to where players are going right now, to where the pressure is on other franchises. I think the Eagles have been very forward-thinking here, which doesn't surprise me with Howie Roseman. And they've filled a very under-the-radar need, but it's one that has been pressing them for quite some time. And we know the argument I always give, right, with that in 2017, Bo Allen, Destiny Vio, 50% of defensive snaps, and since then it's just been an absolute injury carousel with no one able to really do anything. I think for me, going on from that, it was like, okay, well, let's just see production-wise in 2019. Forget depth for the minute. Forget your DT3 and your DT4. Let's just look at some stats. Let's just talk raw numbers and see, was the interior pass rush that good? Because on the surface, to the naked eye, to the unsuspecting general NFL fan that tunes in on a Sunday, maybe puts in NFL Network on an Instagram story and says, yeah, because that's what general NFL fans do, I think, probably. Right, so let's just look at this. Okay, right. The Eagles had 43 sacks last year. 43. 43 of them last year. That puts them 6th in the league. 6th, alright? Top 10 It's going well. You think that's a very good year, considering the Eagles were without Timmy Jernigan, considering they were without Malik Jackson, considering that Hassan Ridgeway went down. Like, that's a good number to have. Like, fair play, Jim Schwartz. 10 of those sacks came in one game against the New York Jets. We all seem to forget that. 7 games last year, the Eagles had 1 sack or less. Not ideal. Not ideal at all. And that worried me a lot. That got me thinking. So what I did was assume the average number of sacks for the Eagles on the year, which if you take 43, you divide it by 16, you get a number, probably. Maths isn't very good, I'm not going to lie. But it's around 3-ish, okay? Around 3 sacks. But let's take away that 10 and see what the Eagles would be left with. Alright, you take away like 8. Let's say take away 7. Right, so you bring that New York Jets game down to around 3 sacks. Okay, that would put them 24th in the league. 24th in the league in sacks. That's not good enough. It was not good enough all year long. And you can attribute this for many different reasons. You can look at it and say, alright, well, maybe it was the secondary. Maybe the secondary wasn't helping. Well, yeah, but at the same vein, the Eagles are getting home. They're getting the pressures. They're just not putting the icing on the cake. And that had been the big thing. So, you go and look at Javon Hargrave's sacks. Javon Hargrave's stats, anything else beginning with S and ending in S? Socks. He had 4 sacks in 2019. More importantly, though, his 49 quarterback pressures were the 10th most in the league among interior defensive linemen. The only 3 better, off the top of my head, were Aaron Donald, Vita Vea. I can't remember the third one. So, you've got 2 there. Alright, we're just keeping you guessing. That's what we're doing, keeping you on your toes. He had the 4th most hurries in the league. He was the 8th best interior defensive lineman per Pro Football Focus behind Fletcher Cox. Now, the only reason that Hargrave got out of Seattle to begin with, the situation isn't ideal. They run a 3-4, you've got Cam Hayward, you've got Steven Tuitt, and in a year where then Brad Dupree breaks out, and you've got Javon Hargrave breaking out despite playing in like 50% of snaps. He only just started to play pass blocking snaps, really. This was a recent addition to his game. Obviously being a nose tackle, you're expected to be a big boy, to be a thick, Brucey boy, to clog those lanes. And this was the first year that the Steelers kind of cut him loose. And he's got a lot of electricity in his play. And I haven't watched a tremendous amount of tape. I've watched 2 games on him, trying to get this film room done for you guys for around Tuesday, Wednesday next week. Then working on Darius. So there's a lot in the pipeline. But you see, with the scope, that he's just kind of outplayed Pittsburgh. They've got to make a choice. The Steelers have to choose. Do we keep around someone that's playing 50% of snaps, or do we want a Cam Hayward? Do we want a Brad Dupree? Do we want a Steven? I think as a 3-tech, that's the important bit. As a 3-tech, I think he's got a lot of upside. And if we take that role as the 3-tech, and you imagine the Eagles' defensive line of having Fletcher Cox here, you've got Javon Hargrave next to him, the 5-tech spot, the next spot along, I think you can give to Malik Jackson. I think Malik Jackson is going to be the Michael Bennett of this Eagles defense. I said it last year before he got injured. I think the skill set he brings is very Michael Bennett-esque. He's played both the 3 and the 5 role in Jacksonville. I think he's got that potential. He's got that electricity. And if you look at the Eagles' defensive end depth chart where you've got Brandon Graham's locked up, that's fine. Derek Barnett, 4th year. No guarantee the Eagles will pick up his 5th year option. And behind that, Sharif Miller hasn't done anything. Josh Sweat is unreliable. Deshaun Hall barely got on the field except for that Week 4 game against the New York Jets. And overall, I just feel as though the Eagles have a more pressing need. They need to get some versatility up front with guys like Jannard Avery as well, a stand-up pass rusher. I think this is a very, very strong move. For the pricing it is as well. It's basically a Malik Jackson contract, take 2. It's a very good deal for someone of his size, of his stature, and more than anything, Fletcher Cox finally has some long-term stability alongside him. Cox's production went down last year. You cannot afford to take away any leverage from Cox. The second teams can double team Cox, they will. It's a given. He's too good. If it wasn't for Aaron Donald, we'd be talking for a generationally gifted pass rusher. There's no doubt in my mind about it. So you have to give him that support. And I don't think that... and do you know what? This signing isn't sexy. It wasn't Byron Jones. It wasn't going out and trading for DeAndre Hopkins. It wasn't one of the star running backs. It wasn't a Todd Gurley. but it's someone that is going to not only benefit the secondary by forcing mobile quarterbacks to run outside into the clasps of those defensive ends, but more than anything, help add to a punishing run game. We know the Eagles have always prioritized stopping the run. It's going to take some weight off of Fletcher Cox. It's going to allow a name like Hassan Ridgway, like Anthony Rush to grow. And it's going to cost some tiddlywinks. So just looking at his contract here. So obviously we know 3 years, $39 million, $11 million signing bonus, $26 million of it's guaranteed. But according to SpotTrack, this is how it lays out. So he makes $1 million base salary in 2020. It's another Howie backloaded deal. It's a $5 million cap hit, then a $16 million cap hit in 2021. So the Eagles are expecting, based off that framework, maybe a baby step year, a growth year, to find that role to feel at home. 2021, they're expecting big things. And with the salary cap increasing every year, that number's going to be fairly average. I think we're going to see a Fletcher Cox extension between 2021 and 2022 anyway. And then they've got an out in 2022. And it would leave them with just $3 million, or $3.9 million, I should say, in cap space, in dead cap space. If they keep him on, another $16 million, undrafted free agent 2023. He's 27 years old. That's in his prime. This isn't a guy who's 32. Isn't a guy that is maybe a bit younger like Ngakoue. This is in his prime. Coming off a career year at 27. We know the Howie Roseman prototype. 27, 28 years old. That's a given. And then it's either played his way out of a team, coming off a bad year, wanting a prove-it deal. I think that first year he's very prove-it to me. It's, taking a fair amount of cap hit, still $5 million, but then you get to year 2. It's very, very interesting. I think the Eagles are expecting big things from this man. This is going to be a cornerstone piece. And do you know what? Just for the sake of a podcast analogy, we know we know what's coming. We know the Motor Trend GMC Truck of the Year 2020-2021 absolute hybrid. It's Javon Hargrave. That's a dream move. That you couldn't ask for a better free agency move. No, it wasn't a linebacker. But the Eagles seemingly don't value them anyway, so I don't know why we'd be expecting anything different. This is a very, very strong move for the Philadelphia Eagles. And it's something I think we should all be really excited about. We should all get behind. And I'm just excited to see what he can do. I can't wait to break down the tape on this man in full depth, because the traits that he flashes are absolutely devastating to an already dominant pass rush. If you can lift those stats up, you can raise that bar, you get the pass rush back to where it needs to be, and then you add in Darius, someone that is going to be a lockdown corner, that is going to force a quarterback to sit in the pocket, come off that first read, come off Amari Cooper, come off Terry McLaurin, whoever it may be. And you focus on those tight ends, or you focus on the running backs, where you have to move around. It's gonna give someone like Hargrave that leverage, that time to get home, to open things up for the defensive end. This, for me, is a move that, while it doesn't naturally impact linebacker, while it doesn't naturally impact corner, the butterfly effect of his presence on the field will do a lot of damage. And that's what I'm very excited about. But that's it for part 1 of the podcast, guys. Now, part 2, we're going to answer your questions in a little show that I like to call Thank You Next. I always ask for your questions on Twitter. You send them in. We've got like 13 of them today, so we're going to dive through those. And then I'm going to talk about Darius Slay at the end of the show. If you want to see more of this podcast, guys, if you're on YouTube, hello again. You're amazing. It will be out a little bit later this evening on all good podcasting platforms. If you're into the podcast still and you're listening on your way in from work or at home in this self-quarantining universe we're living in, strap yourselves in. It's time to ask Thank You Next. For those of you that are still around, it's your favourite part of the show. It's my favourite part of the show. It's Thank You Next. I ask for your questions on Twitter at Liam Jenkins PSM. You send them in, and they vary. I mean, I still think the highlight of this segment was the email I received about 3 months ago that simply asked, do you ski? Nothing will ever top that in my mind. That might be the peak of this podcast, but we're going to get as close as we can. We're going to start things off with a question from one of our regular listeners at JeordieFighter141, who asks, Thank You Next. Do you think Philly could wait a round or two before getting a wide receiver? I mean, I think they can. Whether or not they will is a very different discussion. And judging how free agency's panned out, with names like Robbie Anderson still sat there, with Brashad Perriman now likely looking to stay in Tampa Bay, I think personally that it's looking, there could be a slide. And I don't want to go all in on that, because the thing is, you never know how the draft's going to fall. You could sit there for months and months mocking out different situations, but all it takes is one team like the New York Giants last year to throw caution to the wind and just throw absolute anarchy into the equation. And what you're ending with is something where the Eagles have to go for a plan B, which obviously last year probably involved a surprising trade up to a player they maybe didn't see being directly attainable before. So I think there is a chance with so many wide receivers that one slips to 21. Now, I don't know who, whether it will be one of the top three of obviously Ruggs, Lamb or Judy. I would kill for CD Lamb. I think he is, in my opinion, the top receiver in this class, but it's likely that one of them will fall. Outside of that though, can they wait a round or two? Yeah, like when you get to round 3, that's when guys like a Devin Duvernay or a Courtney Davis come into play, or depending how the board falls, some of those maybe taller wide receivers like a Patman or a Pittman. I believe it's a Patman and a Pittman, isn't it? There's Desmond and Michael. You got Chase Claypool, who I know Geordie's quite high on, could end up being like a late riser. There's a lot of good wide receivers in this class. I think it's way too premature at this stage to work out what the Eagles are going to do, because they haven't figured out what's going on the current roster. I mean, Deshaun Jackson should be back. We don't know what's happening with Deshaun Jackson. Obviously, JJ Arcega-Whiteside is someone that is still being overlooked in all of this and does have the mould of a number one wide receiver. If he can develop into that, we don't know, but he has to at least factor into the equation. And then we've got Greg Ward Jr. Like, at the very least, you're looking at a wide receiver 3? You're looking for a slot replacement for Nelson Aguilar. You don't really want to replace Deshaun Jackson right away. And your WR1 could be a second round pick from last year that may still have a high upside. So frankly, like, I don't know. It's a really murky image right now, and it's easy to get lost in the appeal of just some of the outstanding names that are on the board. But there's a lot of time between now and the draft, and I think a lot will change. I think the private pro days and stuff are going to play a role. We'll see, but there's definitely potential for it. Teddy Biriani asks, hypothetically, say the Eagles give up a 1 for Unique. Would you rather spend 53 on Chin, Duggar, or a Hamlick, Ayuk, Rager, or Mims? So basically, if the Eagles do trade for Unique Ngakoue, and I want to touch on that at the end of this podcast, and the rumours and the reports and all the rest of it, and then would I rather spend the second round pick on a safety or a wide receiver? Now, it's tricky because the receivers that I love, Hamler. I think Rieger's brilliant, but I don't know, something's not quite sitting right with me. I think Mims is going to be a riser, but to me, he's got WR1 written all over him. He's just a bit raw in terms of route running, and it will collide massively with Arcega-Whiteside's development. So I would more look to an Ayuk for a slot guy. I personally would spend the pick on a safety. If it's just out of those two, I love Kyle Duggar. I think Duggar is absolutely outstanding. He's one of those small school sleepers. Bearing in mind, I was a huge Chauncey Gardner-Johnson guy. And we saw him slide. There's no reason why, with a class that's stacked at wide receiver, you can't make up for that and go for a slightly bigger name at their position. I can't see them going for, obviously, the elite names at the board, but I do think someone like a Chin or Duggar would make sense there. So that would be the way I look at it. Thank you. Next, Jay Fizzle Dizzle, who is one of the residents of our PSN Discord, says, why haven't the Eagles made any offensive moves to match the defensive moves, namely signing Robbie Anderson? Good question. I think purely because of the strength of the offensive side of the ball in the draft. Like, realistically, if you're going to spend $10 million on Robbie Anderson, would it not make sense to just wait and draft a speedster and pay him like tiddlywinks for 4 years? That's the way you've got to look at it, because year one, providing that unless it's a starting slot receiver, it's going to be a rotational role or a situational role to begin with. At least with the current picture. So paying Robbie Anderson that much money when Deshaun Jackson's already getting that much money and is basically the same skill set, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't know. I think that it's tricky to say. I could see them going after a tight end free agent. That would be my one to watch, so to speak, or an offensive tackle, because obviously you've lost Halapoulivaati Vaitai, and behind Dillard you've now only got Jordan Mailata, so I could see them going in for a free agent offensive tackle. It's also worth noting that they can't announce some moves yet, due to the coronavirus and travelling and that sort of thing, all that comes out of reports and interest and that sort of thing. So I feel that could be why. There may well be pieces in place that we just aren't hearing about, that the Eagles maybe have signed an offensive tackle, or they do have a wide receiver, but I think they will look to the draft a wide receiver. Personally, with a need that strong and a class that deep for that need, I think it'd be silly to look anywhere else, as enticing as some of those free agents are. He also asked, with the forgotten signing of Trevor Williams, do we need another cornerback? I want to stop with that question because I will be doing a film room on Trevor Williams. I've got like so many to do over the next few weeks. I'm going to pass out after Red Bull, I think. But no, genuinely, I do think that Williams does have some nice upside. We know he can play in this league. There are some injury questions round him, which surprised me at the time. Like, I don't know why the Eagles went after someone with an injury history days after saying we've got to stop going after players with injury history. But he does warrant a film room. I think that the Eagles may have a nice CB2 there. And the other thing to bear in mind is you've still got Sid, Sewell, Maddox, LeBlanc. Like, any of those guys are realistic starting candidates in a CB2 or CB3 role. So I don't know if they need another cornerback. I think it'd be nice. We know they like to stock up the position because injuries seem to decimate it every year, so I fully get it, but I don't think it's needed. And then 3 things you absolutely need for a coronavirus lockdown. That's a good shout. Alright, okay, I would say, that's tough. One, a games console, whether it's a Nintendo Switch or a computer, Xbox, whatever. Hey, I'm a retro guy. I went through a breakdown phase when I was 19 and I just randomly started collecting like PlayStation 1, so I've got like 3 of them. A games console with a sports game you can sink your teeth into, like a Football Manager or an NCAA or something you can get 10 years deep into a franchise and emotionally invested. Like, give me one of those. Outside of that, I think as many ready meals as you can, because I don't understand how to cook or how an oven works. So heated noodles, microwavable dishes, anything like that, stock them up. And thirdly, I would probably go on a limb and say, do you know what, it's weird. I would say just something that's going to make you happy, like a personal thing. So maybe like a release, so a guitar, something to creatively let stuff out, like download Logic on your MacBook, or some sort of music thing, or like video software, whatever it may be, just to stay creative and get stuff out. Like, I'm really lucky because I get to do that every day with work. But I would say, to stop yourself going crazy, something to be creative. So even if it's an Etch-a-Sketch or like a colouring by numbers or something just to be creative, I would say that, because that's going to keep your brain moving. Start writing a book. You never know, it could be an Eagles biography of an Eagles fan. Anything that's just going to keep your brain ticking over and stop you going insane, I think is a good shout. Or Animal Crossing on the Nintendo Switch, which also ticks box number 1. B-Cam, our ride to Brian Cameron, host of Flipping the Birds, doesn't ask a question. He just says, let's go. So let's go, Brian. Thank you for listening. Also, we're just being invaded here with PSN writers. Steve says, why did you turn me off of my one true love in Slate hours before we traded for him? Listen, I'm going to get to my Darius Slade take after this, because I feel like it's been misconstrued. But it's not my fault. I didn't mean to. We all know my number 1 cornerback going into free agency was Byron Jones. And I think there was nothing wrong with Darius Slade, but it was, if you're going to pay him that money and have to give something up, I wanted a better scheme fit. And that's all it come down to. Slade is still an incredible corner, and we'll get to that in just a bit. The Crayons Melt says to me, my question, will I be judged if I don't want the Eagles to draft Henry Ruggs? Depending on the person you do want them to draft, potentially. Like, if you go, don't draft Henry Ruggs because I want a wide receiver here and I want the first round pick on Patrick Queen or something, we'll be like, alright, okay, I understand. If it's, I don't want Henry Ruggs because he's bad, then that's a different discussion. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's got to be context. It's like, I don't want Henry Ruggs because I want the Eagles to get Christian Fulton, or I don't want Ruggs because I think the Eagles should draft a defensive end or trade back. I'll hear you out. If you say, I don't want them to draft Ruggs because it's just Henry Ruggs, isn't it? Then that it might not go down too well. Isaac the Sword, who's another resident of our Discord server, says, what would be the next best move for the Eagles after the Darius Slade move? Very good question. If it's me, I would genuinely go out of the way and sign like a free agent tight end or something like that. Or a free agent offensive tackle, or a free agent, maybe not wide receiver, like a running back, some depth. Like, obviously, linebackers a big need for this team, which also happens to be your next question of also, how would you solve the problem at linebacker? The issue with that is I don't think the Eagles view it as a problem. Like, we're overlooking that. Like, we view it from the outside as, we might want to do something here, it's getting bad. I don't think the Eagles view it that way. I really don't. I think the Eagles view this as some sort of farming talent for special teams players. It's odd. Like, I love Alex Singleton. I think he's a high energy guy. I know he decimated the CFL. I loved him in preseason. I loved the showdown between him and TJ Edwards in that preseason week 4. That was the most fun I've ever seen, when they were just exchanging tackle for tackle. I think Jannard Avery's a name to watch. I don't understand Camu Grugier-Hill and Nigel Bradham going. You've now got 0 returning players outside of Gary from last year. Like, Zach Brown went, Fort went, Bradham goes. Like, if you're gonna cut the head of the snake, make sure you've got a new pet. But I just don't think the Eagles view them that way. Like, it would stun me if they went out and drafted a top linebacker, because it's just not how they operate at this point. So the issue with it is I don't think they will solve it, because they don't see it as a problem. For them, it's like, well, it's 3 guys in the middle of the field. We play nickel, that takes one of them off, that's down to 2. As long as they can hold their own and tackle reasonably well, then they're alright. And that seems to be the issue. It's more of a mental thing than it is a talent thing. Like, it's the Eagles not realising that it's a position of need. They'd rather invest elsewhere. They may go and sign a couple of free agents. I know Reggie Ragland is currently still out there, young guy. I believe they had interest pre-draft. Don't quote me on it. I was a long time ago, like a few years, but could be a name, couple of down years. But they're not going to go out and spend 35 million on a player. They probably will now, but I just can't see it happening, and that's what is a little bit bedazzling. Hero Yoy, I hope I've said that right. It says Y-U-Y. Yoy? Yoy? I sound like Travis Scott. Anyway, I am DJ88, we shall more affectionately name him, says, do you trust Jalen Mills to replace Malcolm Jenkins, or should the Eagles be searching for a replacement through trade, draft, or free agency? I trust... okay, right, let's not... I don't trust Jalen Mills. If someone cheats on you, and they say they'll never do it again, and they really love you, and they've made a big mistake, and you kind of know you love them as well, it's not that you fully trust them. It's probably just that you don't want the hassle of breaking up. You can't be dealing with the drama, so you just accept it and hope they don't. And I think that's where I stand with Jalen Mills, if I'm honest. Like... it's not that I trust that he is the perfect replacement, because I think the perfect replacement would be someone like Will Parks. But I do think that what he shows around the line of scrimmage, what he shows with his tackling, what he shows with, I would say his instinct, but up until like his return last year, that was questionable. With his, I don't know, like with his physicality, with the rah-rah guyness, with the leadership, I get why they'd say, hey, let's trial him. I don't think he's going to be the week 1 starter alongside Rodney McLeod. I do think that would be a Will Parks or a drafted guy. I can see Rodney McLeod taking that role, if I'm honest, because he played a lot more snaps inside this year. Like, we did not see that at all in 2018. 2019, he's in the box every other play. Like, it was almost as if the Eagles were preparing him for a transition. I could see the Eagles moving Mills over the top, personally, and having McLeod, who's already now had experience playing inside and on blitz packages and having to rock and roll coverages. I can see that working a bit better than putting even more weight on the shoulders of Jalen Mills. But I don't know. Like, we know Jim Schwartz loves him. I think as an in-the-box run-stuffing tackler, he'd be great. And I'd much rather McLeod over the top, but it's not my team, and I might be wrong. So I'd be willing to try it through the summer, through training camp, through preseason, but I wouldn't bet my entire house on him just being this dream fit just yet. Eagles 5211 or 5211, 5,200. He says, how do you think they address the linebacker situation? So I think we've just done that. La Panda Lord says, does it make sense for the Eagles to bring Nelson back if they're unable to secure some of the top available free agent wide receivers? I would say no. I think his head went again. Personally, again, that's outside observation, that's no source, that's no insight. I'm obviously upfront and tell you guys when I do have some intel and when I don't. This is just common observation. I think the second that first big drop happened, his head probably went. And I can see the injury maybe lingering over a little bit. If I'm brutally honest with you, I think that it's only right that Greg Ward Jr. gets a shot. Now, I don't know if he'll be the starting slot receiver come week 1. They may well draft a guy like Brandon Ayuk, but I do think he should still have his place on the roster. And the second you bring Aguilar back, it mystifies and adds some real fog around that drafting of a slot receiver. And if you do draft one, it leaves Ward Jr. out in the cold. And that's someone that is grafted his way up, built his way through the practice squad onto the main roster, really showed out for the team, and I think that's the right thing to do, would be to draft someone, let him duke out with Greg. You don't bring back Nelson, not after the just up and down seasons that we've seen from him. Matthew JB says, should we look to the draft for a wide receiver trade or someone now? I would say the draft. And finally, this has been a stacked thank you next. Thank you for listening to Ariana's instrumental for so long. Jericho says, do you think we'll get LeSean McCoy back? And I say, I hope not. Actually, do you know what? I hope we do, because it'll put an end to every bloody off-season. Every off-season I've covered the Eagles, which is since 2015. Without fail, LeSean McCoy, Deshaun Jackson, linked with the team every year. Every year. Doesn't matter what they're doing, doesn't matter how good they are, what contract they're on, they always get linked. If it means it puts an end to it and we can stop the speculation, fine. I think the problem with it though now is that at least before you didn't have Miles Sanders. You had a north-south guy, and then whatever Wendell Smallwood and Corey Clement were doing. Like, you need someone that has that east and west in him as well. And that's what LeSean McCoy does. The issue is, Miles Sanders does it, he's going to do it better, and that's your young guy. That's your young star at the minute. McCoy would be in a rotational role, but I think that role will be way too similar to what someone like Boston Scott provides, who you're already paying on a cheap deal. But that's it for Thank You Next. Again, thank you for sending in your questions. It's always a blast hearing what you guys have to say, as long as it doesn't involve me skiing. If you do want to ask me questions in future, it's at Liam Jenkins PSN on Twitter. If not, don't worry about it, I understand. And we're now going to go into probably the biggest debate of the show with myself on Darius Slay. And I want to clear the air with Darius Slay, because obviously since day one before free agency, when I've been discussing the cornerback picture, I've been very all in on Byron Jones, and that turned into a very anti-Darius Slay case, because I in the bottom of my heart, I kind of knew that since the Eagles were linked with him at the trade deadline, then they get linked with him again, and the more you hear about it, you just get a hunch it's going to happen. And I really didn't want to see it when Byron Jones was out there. It's like, if you've got, let's say, if you're a Lamborghini fan, you love Lamborghinis, and there's a Lambo and a Ferrari, and to get the Ferrari, you've got to pay more, but they do the same thing, like same spec, whatever. Like, Lambo's obviously a bit different interior, like probably sounds a bit different, like that kind of thing. Why would you go for the Ferrari when the Lambo's there? Like, that's what you want. That's what fits your style, right? That's the only thing. They're still both supercars. They are still incredible cornerbacks. There is a reason the Eagles have made Slay the highest paid corner in the league, because he will take away your number one receiver. Now, that's great in this defense. My main worry is the tackling, and it's the exact same worry I had with Ronald Darby. Slay missed 11% of his tackles last year, and I know that's not his game. His game is around the catch point. His game is 26 passes defensed in 2017. His game is 8 interceptions that year. His game is being this speedster with ridiculous footwork and gluing himself to the hip pocket of wide receivers and taking away everyone's number one option, forcing the quarterback to look in field, which is amazing until you end up trying to have to tackle in the open field, which this scheme demands. If Schwartz, the man who drafted Slay, can mould his scheme around Darius Slay, then I'm all for it. I am all for it. Bring me him. Like, give me Darius Slay, because he is a shutdown cornerback. It's something the Eagles have not had in around 10 years. And I can't wait to see it. Like, Slay, I even said in the film comparison video between Jones and Slay that I think Slay, to watch on TV, is by far the more exciting cornerback. Jones is a zone corner. He'll sit, position himself well. He's quick, he can travel, but his game is underneath. His game is being quiet, being subtle. It's not the rah-rah around the catch point. It's not the heroic passes defense. That is Darius Slay. And maybe this is a change of heart. Maybe this is the Eagles saying, hey, we've not had a lot of production from our cornerbacks, so let's get the best man coverage corner in the game. At least one of them. And he's up there. There's no questioning that. There's no denying that. Comparing and saying who would you rather have, like, they've both got contrasting strengths and weaknesses. Like, if you had Darius Slay and Byron Jones together, are basically adult versions of Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby. You have to understand that. That's what we're working with. It's like, if Jalen Mills and Ronald Darby were capable cornerbacks, they would be Byron Jones and Darius Slay. You've got one that is great tackling, great in zone, holds his own, not great around the catch point, doesn't get much ball production. Let's forget everything else with Jalen Mills. And then on the other, you've got someone that's rapid, that travels, that's a man corner, that's instinctive, that clicks and closes, that can break up passes, that stays in their hip pocket, but effort can be questioned at times. And there's the tackling incidents that just worry me a lot. So I'm hoping, my main hope with this is that the Eagles are really going to adapt their scheme for Darius Slay. Because if they don't, I don't want to see that man get criticised, because I don't think it'll be his fault that he ends up put in a situation where he can't win. I would love for the Eagles to put him on an island, to move the safety over, to leverage over to the help of whoever the CB2 may be. Hey, do you know what? Maybe Schwartz has had a knock on the head, and he is going to just say, hey, do you know what, Darius? Follow their number one guy wherever. Line up, press, jam, get your hands on him, disrupt the route tree, and do what you do best. And we'll let the pass rush do the rest. We'll let everyone else do the rest. And if that safety can then help bracket a wide receiver 2 option, can maybe come down and help the nickel cornerback, can maybe give the linebackers some support over the middle, then it helps every other phase of the game. Slay being there helps the team in a way that isn't schematically perfect, but will force the defense to, I think, adjust in other ways. Like, Byron Jones would be the ultimate, if we're sticking with the scheme, we're going to get a cornerback that is the perfect fit for this. I think the problem with that, and there is a problem with it, unfortunately, is, well, if we do, and the scheme still gets questioned, and the scheme still gets beaten, then Jimmer is on the chopping board. If you go and adapt, and you bring in a new corner that has a different skill set, that is a bit taller, that will man up against the best receivers, it's a different mindset. And I truly think that the more I think about it, the more I like it. And I didn't think I'd say that, because I talked myself out of Darius Slay in comparison to Byron Jones. If we take Byron Jones out of the equation, forget Byron Jones exists, I would be so sold on Slay, it's painful. It's like, you know, it's Aaron Donald and Fletcher Cox. It's DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones. It's different guys bringing different stuff to the table. It's Dalvin Cook and Todd Gurley. You know, it's Saquon Barkley, Miles Sanders. It's guys that are great at what they do that fit different things. And when you look for a certain criteria, you're attracted to a certain type of player. That's the thing. Now, Slay is my type of corner. If I'm building a team and I draft a cornerback, or I sign, trade, whatever, I want someone that's going to press. I want someone in man coverage. I want someone to bat passes down. I want someone to step in the face of their top receiving threat and say, not today. Not today. And that is Darius Slay. He is the dreamiest cornerback imaginable. And he's still in his prime. He's just turned 29 years old. 3-year deal. It's great. It's a great signing for this team. If Schwartz can make it work. That's what concerns me. It's nothing to do with Slay. My concerns with Slay aren't on him, because as a cover corner, he is ridiculous. And I'll be bringing a film room to show that as well, and show just how instinctive he is. Like, when he peels off routes and intercepts passes, like, if he's trailing a man downfield with his head turned, and he sees someone check out into the flat, his instinct to peel off, to read the quarterback's eyes and come down and make a play makes me weak. It's unbelievable. There's nothing wrong, though, with wanting a different style for that defense. And it's like, I think that's the thing. It's very easy for this discussion to look into, yeah, well, you hate Darius Slay, and you're a Byron Jones lover. Like, no, I love them both. I just love Byron a bit more. It's not a bad thing. I really hope Slay works. I think it's a fantastic signing. I think the Eagles, who typically are quite stingy in free agency, who go for plug-and-play veterans, have got themselves a star. And that is really exciting. And I think in terms of development for guys like Rasul Douglas, if he's still on the roster, for Sidney Jones, if still on the roster, for Avonte Maddox, if still on the roster, is brilliant. I mean, the Eagles could technically wheel and deal 2 of those guys and have Maddox CB2, LeBlanc CB3. I would start an OnlyFans account for those quarterbacks. That is saucy. So I just wanted to kind of clear the air with that, because I know for the last month or so I've been pounding the table for Byron Jones and comparing him with Darius Slay, but it's not that I was ever against Darius Slay. It was just that I felt the better scheme fit for the same price without giving up draft capital made more sense. When that's taken away, we don't know the reasons why. Maybe Jones didn't want to play in Philadelphia. Maybe the Eagles didn't offer enough. Maybe the Eagles weren't interested at all and it was all a smokescreen and people just hyped it up, and therefore here we are. But the Eagles got their guy. They got a cornerback to build around. They paid someone at the position which they've not done since Byron Maxwell. The one thing they cannot afford to do is let history repeat itself. And I don't think there's a chance of that. I think Darius Slay has proved over the years that his play just doesn't decline. It will freakishly go up one year. I don't know what he was on in 2017. Like, that season was unbelievable. But you're getting a star corner. And I think Howie Roseman has said, hey, Amari Cooper's going nowhere. Terry McLaurin's going nowhere. The Giants always seem to have some weird practice squad promotee that's got a 4.1 40-yard dash time that just sprints all over the place like he's Sonic the Hedgehog. Screw your zone defense. Screw your zone corners. Get me a man that can take away half the field, let the pass rush do the rest, and we'll work on everything else that falls. And if that really is the case, then I am all for it. I genuinely could not be more excited. And there's a love story as well, which I tweeted out because back in 2013, old Jimmy of Schwartzington drafted Darius Slay. His last year as Lions head coach. Started 4 games, played in 13. That was his guy. That was his corner. And then the Lions were like, no, Jimmer. All right, we've had enough. Move on. And Jim and Darius were split apart. And Jim had to look over his shoulder every year as Slay emerged into a 3-time Pro Bowler, one of the best corners in the league, watching his ex succeed and do better without him. And then Jim started doing better. And Darius' relationship got a bit worse. And he looked over his shoulder and was like, wow, I miss Jim and his little eye thing that he does when he concentrates and he squints at the press conference and goes, baseball. I want to come home. And the Eagles went out and said, Darius, he still loves you too. He still thinks about you at night when watching all 22 of Jalen Mills biting on double moves. And Darius said, I still think of him too when Matt Patricia says I'm just good and not elite. And Jim looked over and said, you've always been elite. And then the two got back together. And here we are with them going for Super Bowls. And I will leave you with that tear-jerking thought at the end of the return of the Outside Insider podcast. Guys, thank you so much for lending me your ears for the last 45 minutes or so. You are unbelievable. I'm so damn lucky to have this little listener base, and it means everything to me from the bottom of my heart. Like, this has been a taxing week, I think, mentally, just from how much has gone on, but also emotionally, knowing that, you know, at the end of the day, as I've said before, I run a sports news company and there are no sports happening currently, so this is a little bit stressful in terms of what the next paycheck's going to look like. And I think the drive to create content for you guys who are offering so much support is meaning everything right now. It is pushing me so much harder, and I could not be more thankful for all of you taking that time. Like, even when sports aren't on, you're still so invested in your teams, and Philadelphia is lucky to call you their own. So thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to this show. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Liam Jenkins PSN. I will see you soon. Go Birds.